in the web frameworks GitHub repository, there is this folder 7 CRA shopping list. So here is an example solution for that one. So there is this title component, and then the shopping list component, and the shopping list is here, and it is simply an unordered list, which is then rendering a bunch of shopping list items, which are these components. And here is, if you see this example, there is one new thing here, and it is evident here in this app.js. There is something known as state, and then instead of a function, this is now a class. So this was not instructed in the exercise. Instead, what you would probably would have had that this would have been a function. So this is now, we start to move into a new topic of React, which is the dealing with application state. Do you know what it means when you talk about application state in React? What does the state mean? Do you have any idea? If you have a fixed user interface, like we did with this Helsinki Sanomat, this one, so that it was completely fixed. So in this case, there is no need of keeping a track of state when you have only this kind of view. But when, for example, here in this Helsinki Sanomat web page, they have this menu. Now you can see there is this kind of menu which can be open or closed. So somewhere in the application, you need to keep track of this information, whether or not this menu is closed like it is now, or is it open. And this is something what should be, what is stored in the state. This is the state information. The application can be in the state where the menu is closed, and then there is another state of this application where the menu is open. In the same way, here is a search bar, search field. It is now empty. And that is one state. There is no text in this search field, this form field. If I type here a letter, now I type J letter. The application state has now changed because the view is now different. Now there is nothing in this view, and as you can see here on the background, it shows this kirjata hakusana, this kind of grayed out text. This is now in one state, and now when I type a single letter, the state changes, and now the form field has value J. And another state change, as you can see, when there is nothing here, compared to the situation when I have letter, here is now this X. So this is a button, which is visible based on the state that is there any text in this form field or not. If I click here, the state changes because all the text in this form field is cleared away. So this is what state is. It is anything what changes in the application, anything that you need to keep track of, which somehow affects what you see on the screen. So if I try here, for example, it is now in different view. So then another state would be, if here are these drop downs. 3 drop downs are now closed. I click. State has changed now. The drop down is open. Now it is closed. Now this drop down, okay, it doesn't have any results. Now this one is open or closed. So everything when something changes here, it is a state change. And in React, there is a couple of ways how you can deal with the state. And the first one, and the older way, the traditional way, is to have its so-called stateful class component, which is evident here. So instead of having a React function which accepts props and then returns a React element, instead of a single function, we have a class. Here we have a class of app, which now extends a React component. So this is now using the ES6 class syntax, which we learned in the beginning of this course. So here you can see there is now a constructor method, and then another method called render. When is constructor method called? Do you know? So the constructor method is called when you create an object out of this class. So when you would have somewhere doing new app or so. Now this class is created whenever it is being used as a JSX, and that is now here in this index.js. So here there is this React DOM render call for the app component, and now this will be converted into JavaScript, which creates an instance of this, an object of the class app type. So basically, whenever you create a new component, first thing what runs is this one. When you create a new component which is of class type, so the constructor runs. Then here is a method called render. What do you think where this comes from? Make an educated guess based on the code what you see now here on the screen. A React component is a class which contains this kind of render method. And now in our app class, we have basically written a new implementation out of this. And React will call this render method when React library is drawing the components on the screen. So if you think about the what we had earlier with the functions, here, for example, is a function is returning the JSX which to render. In a class component in React, the render method is the one which returns the JSX which to render. A class can have some other methods as well in it. Some of them are known as React lifecycle methods, which are called by the React library, depending on the situation of the component lifecycle, when it is created, when it is updated, and when it is deleted from the screen. There are these kind of lifecycle events. And there are methods in this React component which you as a developer can then implement in your own class and then have some functionality like that. But at this moment, we don't need to care about those that much. Now, if you want to store some state information, meaning that the component itself stores something, then you have a couple of different ways of how dealing with the state, and this is one of them. We will talk about the other ways later on, and that is something which was discussed in the book, in the Learning React 2nd edition. There was this use state hook introduced in the book, and it is a little bit newer way of dealing with the states. But this is the traditional way, this class-based state. And we're going to be learning both of these. So class type of component, stateful class component, you can have this state property. And that state property is an object. And then into that object, you can store whatever you want, all the state information. And in the case of this Helsinki Sanomat website, what information we would be storing. For example, for this menu, we would store some kind of Boolean information. Is main menu open or not? True and false. Then we would store into the state that, okay, what has been written into this form field, or is it empty? And then we could have our components act on that information. For example, is this X button shown or not? We would store information such as, is this dropdown open or not? Is this dropdown open or not? And what has been selected from there? if this would somehow work, maybe it would filter this result based on the selection here. So state in this class is where you store information on the application state, anything that needs to change the view somehow. Now, because this state is part of the object which is created from this class, you can access it via this called this.state. And then here in this render method, you can see that now the shopping list has a prop called items. The items is now or are now being read from the state of this component and then passed to as props to these items. Now, what comes out of this now is that if this state would be updated, React would automatically execute this render again, and the shopping list would get a new set of props and then render those. So if you want to update the view in React application, you need to update the state. So when you update the state, the view will be updated in the screen. That is the logic. And here you can see how the data is being passed from the state to the shopping list items. Now we could, for example, okay, first place before we make any modification, let's run this application. So you can find this on the folder 7 CRA shopping list on the Web Frameworks repository. And now, because this is an own project on its own, you need to have the node modules present for it to be able to run. So the first thing what you need to do if you want to run this is that you need to be in this folder and then execute npm install to install all the dependencies listed here in the package.json files. I've already done it, but I will do it again here just as an example. So you should now execute npm install for this 7 CRA shopping list folder so that we can then run and modify the application and see what happens. Okay, it has some old unupdated dependencies in this repository. Maybe I should fix them, but that will do for now. So what npm install does is that it will inspect the contents of the package.json in this folder and then install all those dependencies. So basically here, these are the dependencies. It will install React, React DOM, React scripts, and class names. These are now Node.js modules, which come from the npm repository, which you can inspect at npmjs.com. So here are all these different modules available. And for example, the class names, which is listed here, is the module which allows multiple classes in CSS. So we can search and see what is this. This is, as you can see, it's a fairly popular module. On a weekly basis, about 5 million downloads or installations are being done. And this is something that you will be using quite a lot, this npm module repository. For example, if you would need to take Bootstrap into use in your application, you could get it from here. Just install npm install Bootstrap, and it would be installed with the version. Okay, so once the npm install finishes, then you can start the Create React App development server with the npm start, just like we have done before. And now it shows here. Okay, let's make a simple modification to the state. For example, by using a timer. Once this constructor runs, let's make it so that after 2 seconds, we will modify the state by, for example, clearing this items array so that you can see how it works. So when you modify the state, then the view will be updated. So we can start the timer here in the constructor. Set timeout. Then we have the function. We can write the timer handler function. Let's write it with the arrow syntax. So now it should be possible to use the word this here. This state items equals an empty array. This is something which is tempting, but you should not ever do. You should not ever go on and modify the state directly like this, but instead you should use something known as set state call from React. So you should not modify the state directly in React, but you should always use the set state method call when you are dealing with class components. As it says here, it puts a set of changes to the state into a queue, which React will process when it sees fit. Basically, it is almost an instantaneous operation, but you could have multiple set state calls, and not every one of those triggers a re-render. And so therefore, whenever you want to modify the state, you should not do it like this. So not like this, but you should call this set state. And now here you can set that, okay, I want the items to be an empty array. And then let's put 2000 there as the timer. So now what should happen is that after 2 seconds, yeah, okay, there it was. After 2 seconds, the state is updated to be an empty array, and when you reload, there is the first initial state, and then it is gone. With this, I try to illustrate the fact that in React, you don't go on and modify the UI directly, but instead you modify the data, which causes the UI to look like whatever it looks like. And this is called the state. You manipulate the state, and then the UI reflects the state, whatever it is currently. Okay, how about if you would like to add a new element? Let's say here we have milk, bananas, bread, eggs. If you would like to add 10 carrots to the shopping list after the 2 seconds, so instead of deleting the items, we would add a new carrot here. So how would that be done? Do you have any ideas? What should we replace this empty array with? So it would be very tempting to do something like this state items push or something like this, but we cannot do it like this. We cannot go on and modify an object or array in the state, because in React, state must be immutable. Instead, what we must do is that we must assign a totally new array here. So if we put here a new object saying ID 5, then value carrots, and then QTU 5, for example. If we do this, let's see what happens. Now after 2 seconds, it went and crashed. It says props items map is not a function, and it does that one because here below we are inside the shopping list. We are mapping over the items, and now if we update the items to be an object does not have a map method, so the items should always be it should always be an array. So we should have some way of adding something to an array, and we should make a new array out of it. It would be with these square brackets to indicate that we want to create a new array. Then there is this spread operator, which takes the current items and puts it as a basically as the content of the new array. And then now we could put the new object there like it was. So now we would have the ID 5 and then value carrots and then QTU, for example, 5. So let's see if we save, and 2 seconds goes, and then it's still some problem. These items is not iterable. Yeah, it should be these state.items. Okay, yeah, carrots show up there. Bling. So what happens is that through the setState command, we are setting a new array as the value of these items, and then everything goes fine. So that is what you must do always with React when you are updating the state. You cannot go on and modify an array which is part of the state, or modify an object which is part of the state and expect it to work. Instead, you must always make a clone of that array or that object and then modify the clone and then assign that one, the modified clone, into the state. Then it will work. And this one here is called the spread operator. Spread syntax. And then you need to have an array expression or a string, and then you can expand it. So basically what this operation here means is the same as if we would manually write. Okay, I'm going to copy some enter here. Okay, so this spread operator is the same if we would do it like this, that we would have these state items first index, and the second index, third index, fourth index, and 3-1. And then like this. So this line is equivalent of this operation, and this spread operator here is the most interesting part. It is the same as we would have written this one open like this. So the end result is the same. So it works exactly the same here. But for obvious reasons, this one is quite handy compared to doing it like this. Knowing about this spread operator can make your life a little bit more easier. Then we could take a look of another thing on how to deal with events. And let's make it so that we start from the simple case. So that now we had with the set timeout, we modified the state, but how about if we would do it so that we would have here on the bottom a button, and then when we click on that, then we would add, for example, these carrots to our shopping list. So having a button, let's create it here. I'm not going to create a separate component out of it yet. I'm simply going to add it here. So a button, and then maybe it says click me. Okay, so there you have the button, click me. I'm going to now comment out this entire set timeout so that it is not bothering. So now the idea would be that when I click here on the click me button, we would get those carrots here to the shopping list. So any idea how this could be done? What needs to be written next? So what we need to write is an event handler, because we are going to have an event, this click event. And on React, there are different kind of events available. Almost all of the same events what you have maybe gotten used to it when you have written pure JavaScript, when you are reacting to DOM events like click and on change and something like that. They are also available in React, but they are as the same way as the CSS properties in React are written with the camel case syntax, as are the events. So in pure DOM JavaScript, you would have an on-click event, but now in React it is on-click with camel casing. So we can try this out. So we put on-click here, and then we must put some JavaScript here. And now what we should deliver here is a function. The function would be executed when we click on the button. So the function is executed as a result of that event. And here you should use the arrow functions. We could have here, for example, console log, and you click at me. So when we click on the button, it should print this text to the console. To see the console, I must right click here at the empty area, choose the inspect, and then I have it there. Yeah, it's working. If you don't have a function here to execute, if you would write directly like so, what do you think that happens? We can test this out. If we have it like this, without a function to call, instead if we have, for example, a console log directly, when I save, you can see that it is executed when this JSX is being translated to JavaScript. So at the same time when this loads, it says you clicked me. But when we deliver here a arrow function or a function of any kind, now the function is executed when the event happens. Now I reload and I click, and now I get you clicked me. Now we could do something more interesting than printing here in the console. We could do here. Maybe we do this set state, and then we do the same thing as we did here, like so. So I copied the timer thing with the spread operator. And now it's the carrots there. So now as a result of this click operation, we are now executing a state modification. And it adds always these carrots to the array. The state is being modified, and our React code always reflects the situation of the state. Having this kind of state code here alongside this JSX can make the code look quite a bit dirty. How could you move this operation to somewhere else so that we could simply refer here with the function name, for example? We could declare a new method, for example, add some carrots. And then here we could have this set state modification. So now we could call this add some carrots here as a result of this on click. So we would put add some carrots there. now it says that it's not defined, so we should have this dot add some carrots. And now here is the important thing of making a difference of passing a function reference or calling the function. It would be very easy to make the idea that, okay, you need to have here these brackets. It executes this function immediately when this is first time rendered. As you can see, there is some error situation happening, which is described here. There's warning, cannot update during existing state transition, such as within render. Render method should be pure function of props and state. Do you know what does this mean and why this happens? All we did is that we modified this to be like this. What is going on here? This function is executing. In fact, as you can see, it is executing here 1,275 times. And it is executing right at the load time because this syntax means that we are calling this function. This is a function call. It is not a function reference passed to this onClick, but this is a function call which is executed at the time when this render is being first time executed. So React will call this render, and then it will start doing whatever you have written here. Then it encounters this part. It executes this function. It modifies the set state, and what the set state does is that whenever you modify a state, it triggers a new render cycle. So it goes here to the render, starts doing this one, goes here, executes this function, which is a set state. It triggers the render. It goes here, comes here, executes this one. There is the set state. It executes again the render because state was updated, and so on and so on. So you have an infinite loop. And that is what it means here, is that you cannot update during existing state transition. So you cannot modify state here inside render. And that is a very important thing to remember. Now when we take away these brackets here, now we are passing a reference that when there is an onClick event, then execute this function. Okay, now it renders correct. Now when I click here, there is again a problem. Now it says type error, cannot read property set state of something. Cannot read property set state of undefined. So what does this mean? What is now undefined? All I did was I clicked this button. Yeah, so this is now undefined. This was the same thing what was happening in our JavaScript primer when we had the timer thing. So this is not referring anymore to the object created from this app class, so the app component. It is referring to the click event, and set state is not available there. How to fix this? Do you have any ideas? There are basically two ways. Yeah, we could write this as an arrow function, or we could use the bind. I'm going to show both of those. So here in the constructor, we could do it like this. This add some carrots equals this add some carrots bind this. Now we are updating the function reference of this add some carrots. We are using the bind, so we are saying that whenever this function executes, execute the result of this operation, where add some carrots is always executed with this object being the value of this. So this will fix the situation. Now there are these multiple carrots being added. So this is totally a valid way to do it. I have done quite a lot of this in my own programming. But this is an easy thing to make a bug, because very easy to forget this when you are adding these kind of methods. And then it forces you to write always this extra code for all these method handlers, which is not very nice, especially when you have a large application and it can have literally hundreds of these kind of method handlers somewhere. So this works, but maybe a better way would be to use the arrow function. Do you know what would be the correct syntax of transferring these to an arrow function? Doing simply something like this will not work. So now we are dealing with the class, so the correct syntax of transforming this into this one into arrow function would be, okay, in the chat you have some correct answers. So we are declaring basically a property and then assigning the value to be a function. So add some carrots equals, and then the arrow function. So replace this one with this one. So now, because of how the arrow functions work, the binding of this goes correct, as you would expect as a programmer. And now it is working. If you want to pass parameters, then you cannot do it like this. You cannot have here, because this will execute. To put this as an arrow function like this. Now it is a function which is passed here, and then when the click happens, then this is called. So as a homework, if you have not yet read, I recommend you read this again, this React state management. This discusses about this same thing again, and here they are dealing with the another kind of state mechanism. So here they are saying that, okay, here is the React state the old way. So here is this class component being introduced. This is what we have. And then they are here speculating that there could come a day where class components are officially deprecated. Yeah, it could be that this day comes, but at least for now on, the React team has announced that they have no plans of doing this, and that they fully intend to support this class component also in the future. But of course, there is that possible. So here they introduce that what is the newer way of dealing with the state. In my opinion, this is a bit more complex way. So than what it is by doing with the classes. But we will be learning this one also. So if you have not yet read this chapter 6 from this book, you should absolutely do it. And if you have already read it, I suggest that you maybe read it again to get a better understanding. As a homework, you should create here multiple buttons, so that when you have one button to add some carrots, another button to add some strawberries, another button to add some yogurt, and another button to add, for example, beer. So 4 new buttons should be here, and it should say here on the button that add some carrots, add some yogurt, or whatever it is that you want to do. So implementing this kind of small addition to this project is your homework, plus reading the chapter 6 from the book.